In reflecting on my own experience while reading this trilogy, some thoughts or phrases come to mind, and those phrases are gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, harrowing, and addicting. Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into the intricate world of the Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Kuang. But instead of focusing on the godlike magic and epic battles, I wanted to dive deeper and focus on a more poignant theme, which is magic and the marginalized. How does R.F. Kuang use magic as a literary tool to uncover deep-seated social injustices and inequality? Like many of you, my first exposure to magic was through the fantasy realm. I grew up reading things like Harry Potter, Eragon, and The Secret Garden, but in these stories, magic serves as a clear delineation between good and evil. The good guys always have powerful magic to combat dark forces. But the Poppy War Trilogy takes on a different and more complex approach. The Poppy War Trilogy is set in a world inspired by mid-20th century Chinese politics, with its main conflict inspired by the Second Sino-Japanese War. The story follows the journey of Rin, a war orphan who discovers she has shamanic powers. However, unlike the wizards of Harry Potter or the dragon riders of Eragon, her magical abilities don't guarantee her acceptance or respect. Instead, her journey exposes the brutal reality of a society rife with social and economic inequalities. Magic in the Poppy War is the power of brute force, capable of immense destruction and transformation. Yet the power of privilege and social hierarchy proves to be even more deadly. Those with shamanic power, like Rin, are granted abilities but not respect or status that one might expect. Rin's journey is a stark reminder that no matter how powerful she becomes, it will never change the way that the ruling class views her. In reflecting on my own experience while reading this trilogy, some thoughts or phrases come to mind, and those phrases are gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, harrowing, and addicting. I think that these books force the reader to look at the despicable truths of history right in the eye and reckon with what war and systems of oppression and imperialism do to nations and do to people. I personally absolutely loved this trilogy because I could not stop thinking about the world or the characters within these books. I feel changed after reading this, and I think Rin, Nezha, and Kate will be characters that I think about for a very long time. Their story is incredibly heartbreaking and perfectly illustrates how systems of oppression affect people in micro and macro scales. Rin's journey vividly illustrates that marginalized faces in high places are not enough to save her people. Even as she rises to power, becoming part of the ruling class, the struggle and suffering of her people persist. For instance, Rin realizes that no matter how powerful I become, they'll always see me as a peasant girl from Tikni. Not only does Rin's journey in the first and second book of the trilogy encapsulate her ongoing battle with societal prejudice, but it also illustrates how she is complicit within the oppressive system by carrying out the will of the ruling class, operating under the false hope that by becoming part of the system, it will save her. In one particularly harrowing scene, Rin confronts the Empress Su-daji and realizes the futility of her efforts to gain true power. Quote, "You think power means you can change the world, but power just means you're a bigger target." This underscores the reality of the constant threat that Rin faces even as she climbs the social ladder, because the more power she gains, the more of a threat she is to the very fabric of the system that she seeks to be a part of. The dichotomy between magical power and societal privilege is beautifully illustrated between the relationship of Rin and Nezha. Nezha views his powers as a curse, something defiling and disgusting, whereas Rin sees their powers as an opportunity, a strength, an obvious edge within the context of war. She sees their power as a commonality between them, but it only exposes the stark contrast of their differences. Nezha, who comes from a privileged background, wields his power with a sense of entitlement and security, whereas Rin, despite her immense abilities, constantly battles prejudice and exclusion. Who Rin and Nezha are in the context of the empire, their family lineage, their skin color, their economic standing, greatly influence their reality, regardless of magical ability. Although they both have the power to flatten an entire brigade of troops, it is Nezha who wields the ultimate power of privilege. That power, in tandem with his access to his god, make him nearly untouchable. And although in The Burning God, Rin ultimately wins the war, she can't help but reflect on the hollow nature of her victory. We have won nothing. The South is still hungry, still poor, and the Hesperians are waiting in the West, biding their time. Kuang further underscores her overarching message about systems of oppression by illustrating how layered oppression truly is. She does this through her depiction of the Hesperians, a technologically advanced and religiously zealous group from the West. The Hesperians represent a colonial force, imposing beliefs and systems upon the Nikara people. They view the Nikara as inferior and seek to civilize them through conversion and subjugation. This dynamic adds another layer to the exploration of oppression, highlighting the destructive impact of imperialism and cultural erasure. Kuang critiques how colonial powers often use religion and technology as tools of domination, mirroring real-world histories of exploitation and control. The Hesperians' attitudes toward the Nikara are encapsulated in their interactions with Rin and Nezha. For example, when they first meet Rin, they see her only as a test subject for their experiments on shamanic abilities, referring to her with a cold detachment. She's an object of study, not a person. Their treatment of Rin is clinical and dehumanizing, reflecting their view of Nikara as lesser beings to be examined and controlled. In contrast, Nezha, who comes from an elite background and has a more westernized appearance and demeanor, is treated with a semblance of respect and curiosity. The Hesperians see him as someone who could be civilized and integrated into their society, exemplified by a Hesperian remarking, "He could be one of us." This contrast highlights the racial and cultural hierarchies enforced by the Hesperians. While Nezha's privilege affords him a level of acceptance, Rin's appearance and background condemn her to objectification and exploitation. The trilogy underscores that true liberation requires dismantling of these deep, entrenched systems of oppression, not just replacing the faces of those in power. As Rin poignantly reflects, power doesn't change who you are underneath, it just makes you more of who you've always been. The Poppy War trilogy isn't the only series to tackle these themes. N.K. Jemisin's The Broken Earth trilogy also uses magic to explore social injustices, particularly those on racial and environmental exploitation. These stories remind us that magic, while a fascinating literary tool, can often be used to unveil the real-world struggles of marginalized communities. R.F. Kuang herself has spoken extensively about these themes. The Poppy War is very much a story about how systemic oppression operates, and how individuals can be complicit in systems of power. If this analysis hasn't yet convinced you to read the Poppy War trilogy, I wanted to shift gears and read quotes from the trilogy that I think go unbelievably hard. But don't worry if you haven't read the series yet, the story and context of these quotes will just make them hit even harder. She dodged the first one. He swung his fist back in reverse and caught her with a backhand that left her grasping. The lower half of her face went numb. He'd slapped her. He'd slapped her. A kick she could take, a knife hand strike she could absorb, but that slap had a savage intimacy, an undertone of superiority. Something in Rin broke. She couldn't breathe. Black tinged at the edges of her vision, black then scarlet. An awful rage filled her, consumed her thoughts entirely. She needed revenge, like she needed to breathe. She wanted Nezha to hurt. She wanted Nezha punished. Her heart skipped a beat. He was so beautiful then, standing right in the space of the road where a beam of moonlight fell across his face, illuminating one side and casting long shadows on the other. He looked like glazed porcelain, preserved glass. He was a sculptor's approximation of a person, not human himself. He can't be real, she thought. A boy made of flesh and bone could not be so painfully lovely, so free of any blemish or flaw. When you have the power that you do, your life is not your own. His fingers tightened around hers. People will seek to use you or destroy you. If you want to live, you must pick a side. So do not shirk from war, child. Do not flinch from suffering. When you hear screaming, run toward it. They believe in a singular and all-powerful deity, which means they cannot accept the truth of other gods. And when nations start to believe that other beliefs lead to damnation, violence becomes inevitable. Hate was a funny thing. It gnawed at her insides like poison. It made every muscle in her body tense, made her veins boil so hot she thought her head might split in half. And yet it fueled everything she did. Hate was its own kind of fire, and if you had nothing else, it kept you warm. That centuries of warfare later, this country was still a canvas for the gods, that their celestial essence still seeped through the cracks between worlds. And maybe that was why they had to erect their garish cities of flashing lights and screaming noises, to deny the fact that their world was fundamentally without divinity. He loves her. Of this, he's certain. He loves her laugh, that sharp, sudden sound, the cynical laugh that always comes too quick like it's ripped out of her. He loves her quick, confident grin. He loves her resilience, her bravery, even her impulsiveness. She's everything he's not, unbound, reckless, free. He's never known anyone like her. She terrifies him, and he loves her so much it hurts. She's the only divine thing he's ever believed in, the only creature in this vast, cruel land who could kill him, and sometimes, in his loveliest dreams, he imagines she does. Woo! So, what can we take away from this exploration of magic and the marginalized? The Poppy War Trilogy shows us that power, whether magical or political, does not inherently change societal structures. True change, or ultimately liberation, can only be realized if the entire system is reimagined. Rin's journey is a powerful narrative that compels us to reflect on our own world and our own ongoing struggle for equality and justice. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the Poppy War Trilogy. If you haven't read it yet, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts or your favorite parts of the trilogy in the comments below. How do you see magic being used to address themes of marginalization in other books? I'd love to hear you expand on this conversation if you've read anything else that aligns with this analyzation of magic as a literary tool. I would love to chat with you below. And I think that's it. I really love these books. I'm so glad I could sit and chat with you at length about this trilogy. I'm such an R.F. Kuang fangirl, so please, someone, if you know how to get on her PR list or if you know how to get arcs of Kuang's work, please hook me up. I would love to read anything that she puts out. Anyway, thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.